Surprised y'all don't like hearing about the 116 stuff. Nah, JK. I know you don't. You served your time in 116. So, quick reminder on the videos, 5 to 7 minutes. Everybody must speak. It's okay to have unequal division of the work, though. If somebody's like the main presenter and then all the other teammates come in for a sentence or two, it's fine. I just want to make sure I see everybody in those videos. I better see everybody's smiling face, because part of the rubric is, your professionalism, all these things that I can't assess if you never show up in the video, and then I have to give you zeros for all those. I don't want to do that. I want you to see you all succeed. So just make sure you're all showing up on camera and saying something, enunciating properly like the rubric says, and all that good stuff. If you don't know what that stuff means, make sure you're checking out the rubric and seeing exactly how you're going to be assessed. As always, the rubric is the final word. Anything I say, your PM says, Dr. Hertz says, the rubric outweighs all of us. So double check the rubric. If I misspeak in lecture, that rubric is what stands. We actually have some confusion. I haven't followed up to see if we have a resolution of this yet. But like deploying your projects is one of the big questions, since we just went through Sprint 2. Your project on the rubric, it says, needs to be deployed on appropriate hardware. So in your demo, you have to show off your app deployed on appropriate hardware. This means no localhost for web apps. It means no simulators for mobile apps. It means no, I guess, what would this even mean for desktop apps? No, but it needs to be running on your desktop, I guess. Don't run a desktop app on your phone. I guess would be the only way to mess that up. But it has to run and work on the appropriate target hardware, and you have to show that working. Anyway, today's activity, same thing as Wednesday's activity. I already spoiled this at the end of last lecture for those of you who actually listen to me. This is the same activity, except it's a group activity this time. So take all of the stories that you all wrote individually and decide what you want to use for your actual video. So this one is more deliberation, more debating, possibly arguing, and talking with your team about what you're actually going to do for your video. Because presumably you have 5 fantastic stories written and scripts for your presentation, and you want to somehow combine that into one. Either pick whoever has the one that the team likes the most and expand on that and run with that, or kind of find ways to combine them. I don't care how you do it. That's between you and your group, you and your teammates. But boil this down to one script. And I recommend, taking this more seriously than just an activity, because the more solid you have your script right now, the easier it's going to be when that video time comes. When it comes time to actually make that video, you're going to have a lot easier time if you have a really solid script and a really solid idea from this activity of what you're going to do. And as with all the group activities, everybody can submit the same PDF, but everybody does have to submit. So if everybody on your team submits except you get a 0, your teammates get whatever the score is for what they submitted. But it's okay to all submit the same doc, and I think that's all I need to say about this. And I'll hang out if there are any questions. I do have a meeting at 4, so I do have to, cut the stream at that point. But I'm going to hang out until then, until about 3:50. You did your 116 time. It's time for you to do your 442 time now. Ooh. I don't know. I'm excited about what 116 is these days. If anything, you should be upset that you didn't get to go through that 116. Most of you had to go through the Java 116 still. Most of you, I would guess, most of you were probably the last semester even of the old 116. You just barely missed the new one, which, depending on your opinions, good or bad. And some of you did take the new 116, actually. I had to take the super old 116 when I went through. But, as the people have demanded, I'm not going to talk about 116. 442 has also changed, for what it's worth. 442 went through a lot of changes. This is a tough course to figure out what to do in. like how exactly to structure it. Like we know what content we want to cover, and there's like 100 more topics that we could stuff into this class. But the tough thing is, how do we assess you in 442? That's a question that it's a recurring question. We still don't really have it completely solved, but it's such a tough one to answer. How do we assess you in this class? And we've tried a lot of different things. We're doing, in its current structure, this is a lot of Matt's planning, Dr. Hertz's planning, where we're assessing, which I like, which I agree with, where we're assessing you on more of the process instead of the product. So there's very little in the rubric that says, is your app cool? Is it big? Is there a lot of stuff here? Is it, quality software? We don't really ask a lot of those questions. It's more of, did you follow the process? That's why 40% of your grade is straight up Scrum board, documentation, commit messages, all the onboarding tasks. And then a focus on testing. How are you proving to your team? How are you giving your team confidence that what you contributed is actually working? Is something important out there in the world? And then the 40% of, did you actually build any software? Did you engineer any software? Back before then, I ran the course for a while, and I was 100% on grading you on what you delivered. Did you deliver working software that justifies the time that you were supposed to spend on it? If yes, here's your points. If no, you don't get your points. But grading that is extremely tough, because it basically just comes down to me deciding, is this good enough to earn whatever grade you get? And you can imagine all the complaints. Every time I take away points, it's, what? I thought we did enough. And I always had teams trying to do the bare minimum and constantly trying to figure out what the bare minimum was. And then when they were one notch below the bare minimum, I'm like, hey, you missed your target. I'm taking away points. And then they complain, well, we thought we did exactly the bare minimum. Painful. So now we have a clear rubric. This is how you're graded, and most of it's on process. It works a lot better. It takes some of the excitement away, but to be honest, it's so hard to get a group of 442 students excited about their projects anyway. There's always like roughly about 5 teams that will be really excited about what they're doing. True, like every semester, no matter what the course is, even with this structure focused on process, there's always about 5 teams that will be really excited and take it seriously. And then it's the rest of the class that's just, they need that rubric, or else they don't know what to do. Because when I say, the very first time I taught 442, I don't know if you want all this backstory or whatever, but the very first time I taught 442, my big first day lecture was, I didn't really have much for a grading structure or anything. My big theme, and I had a slide that just said this, and then I shouted it, and I said, show me something cool. Like, that was the tagline for the course. Show me something cool. Build software that you're passionate about, that you care about. This is your opportunity to work on, that whatever idea you've had for a while that you've wanted to build, but you didn't have time to do it because you had your ops homework and your 331 homework and everything else. Here's the time where I'm giving you this course so you have to do this, and just do whatever you want. And just show me something cool at the end. Show me whatever you wanted to build and something cool. And then, 5 teams show me something cool, and the rest of the class just did nothing all semester. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened here? Young, naive, new Professor Jesse had no idea to expect that. I thought everybody would be stoked for the opportunity to build whatever they wanted instead of what the assignment is telling you have to build. No, not even close. It was not even close. So I realized I had to build a lot of a grading structure, and now we have the course that you see today. Matt took over for a while and added all his touches, and really transformed the course in a positive way to what we have today. And now, it's not as exciting for the top students, for those of you who care, but, it's an inappropriate course for the rest of the class. And those of you who care can still build a cool project. You just have to maintain your Scrum board and write commit messages on top of it, which is good for you anyway. It's like eating your vegetables. Gotta eat them. Beefy Indian Kid, I accept your opinion, but I'll stick to what I just said, that I won't talk about 116. Yeah, Sinker is too. Oh, but I want to talk about it. I mean, I didn't say I wouldn't talk about 115 though. And nobody's asking about or talking about any of the 442 stuff I just said, so I mean, I might take the bait. I mean, if the people who didn't like me talking about 116 aren't listening and interacting anyway, I mean, I'll interact with chat, and y'all want to talk about 115, 116, that's what I'll end up doing. But I'll give other people a chance to talk. I mean, I just spilled a whole bunch of 442 background. If you have no comments on that, but comments on 115, 116 still, I'm going to talk about 115, 116. And just assume that the person who was complaining about 116 last time was just being not nice. We give you our blessing. Hey, yeah, I got 3 asking for it, so I am looking for loopholes. Oh, because I just want to interact with chat. If that's what y'all want to talk about, those of you who are actually interacting, then that's what I'm going to talk about. The only reason I said I wouldn't talk about 116 is because chat was asking me not to. If chat's asking me to, that's what I'm going to do. But when chat's saying, hey, what you're talking about, don't talk about it, I'm going to listen to that. Or else what's the point of doing this on Twitch? What was your advice for finding jobs in this coronavirus pandemic? I love that question, but unfortunately I just don't really have much for advice. Because I just haven't been in tune with how the job market, how the finding a job has changed. I would assume that it hasn't changed very much, except I would guess that your interviews are more likely to be on Zoom than in person, which can be an advantage. So if you're looking for a job like on the West Coast, usually you have to fly out there for an interview. They'll have like a typical process is to have a phone interview, and then if it's especially for full-time positions, they'll fly you out there and you'll have an in-person interview where you'll be there for a few days and you'll interview with like 20 different people sometimes, and you'll have the whole process. If it's all on Zoom, that could actually be easier just because you don't have to do the travel. You don't have to fly out west and navigate a place that you've never been, and that just adds more stress to the process. If you're just sitting in your house interviewing on Zoom, it might actually be a little easier once you get to the interview process. And I don't see anything else changing that much. I wouldn't guess that things would change that much, except just the jobs that are available. I would assume companies that are hit by the shutdowns probably aren't going to be hiring, and tech companies that have been helped by the shutdowns, like Zoom. Who's ever heard of Zoom before coronavirus hit? I'm sure they've hired tons of people since this thing hit, because they need a lot more staff to handle all this demand, I would assume anyway. But I don't really have much specific advice. That was more just commentary. I think only one person was complaining about it. It's possible. I thought my memory's a little fuzzy, but I thought somebody else kicked in too, and nobody gave a counterpoint. So if one or two students speak up, I tend to assume that a lot more people feel that same way that just haven't spoke up, especially when there's no counterpoint brought up. So as chat, you just gotta let me know what you want. I'll go with chat. If you're just like, no, that person's a dick, talk about 116, then I'll talk about 116. I'll talk about, especially during these activities, I don't have any agenda. I don't have anything planned to talk about for this time. So whatever, anything's on the table. Hell, after the lecture time Wednesday, we started talking about my favorite video games. Somebody asked. I'll talk about that. I don't care. We'll talk about whatever. I mean, ideally, I'll give preference if somebody's asking about the activity. But especially this one, you already did this activity Wednesday. It's just deliberating with your group. I would assume there's not going to be questions. But if there are, that will take precedence. Other than that, it's whatever you want to talk about. And things related to computer science, of course, will take the next level of precedence. And then if there's no other questions, I'll take whatever. Should the outline... Oh, this is actually about the activity. Should the outline be bullet points or paragraph style? I would prefer bullet points, just my opinion. So I mentioned this briefly in the presentation lecture on Monday, but not really in the context of presentations, just as a side note. But whenever you have paragraph style, depending on the context, there are rules, you should follow sometimes. But I always prefer bullet points personally. So when I send an email to somebody, if it's blocks of text, I'll start breaking that up. I'll look for ways to break that up into bullet points. If I'm sending a Slack message and the message is getting a little long, I'll try to break that into bullet points just to break up the text, make it a little more visually appealing, and make it easier to make my points. If I have 3 or 4 points I want to make, they're going in bullet points, just so it's very clear. These are the things that I'm saying. If I'm making somebody parse through a big block of paragraph text, it's very easy for them to miss some of my points. If I put them in bullet points, it's clear. There are 4 things here. These are the things that I'm trying to say to you. So just in general, I lean towards preferring bullet points. For this activity, there's no requirement. It's whatever. The main purpose of this activity is for your team to use. You are the end consumer of this content. It's for your team to use to go through and actually generate your video, actually produce your video. So it's whatever your team wants to see. If you actually write it up as a script and say teammate A says this, then teammate B says this, then we advance the slide. If you want to write it up like a screenplay like that, be my guest. As long as what you submit shows me an honest effort and as my general rule of thumb, 45 minutes worth of work, then I'm giving you credit for the activity. And then the actual format is whatever you want it to be after that. Especially since you're the end user of this content. And speaking of, I started going through that barrage of four activities. I'm starting to do the grading on that. I sunk like 4 hours into it yesterday trying to get caught up on some of this stuff. And I thought it would be super easy. I was just going to verify that, there's work here. You put in the effort and it's looking good. You have the things that I was looking for. Man, so many of you just put almost no effort into that. I won't say a ton, but, at least 15% of the class just put no effort into any of those 4 activities. It's really upsetting, especially because it takes a lot more time to grade then, because I have to, give you a 0 and determine who gets a 0 and who gets a 1 and stuff like that. Some of you are definitely getting 0s for that, because come on. For the darts one, it was at least 10 times I saw a student who cut and paste the description, which gave the contestant class and the methods that were given there, and then added like 1 or 2 extra methods and submitted that. Did that really take you 45 minutes, man? Come on. Like, what? What are you thinking? This is a senior level activity that you're supposed to spend a whole lecture on. So as long as I see 45 minutes of good effort and you have clearly a good outline that looks like a 5 to 7 minute presentation, you're going to get the points. For like the darts, there were 5, I think. It said whatever you provide must have at least these 5 methods that the GUI is going to use. You have to have these or else the program doesn't work. Like so many students not just didn't have all 5 of them, but like had 0 of them. Like, what are you thinking? You didn't even read the document. So if you're wondering why those aren't graded yet, that's why, because there's so many of those cases where I have to draw the line of who gets credit and who doesn't. That's what takes so long. Anyway, I had to rant about that because it took up 4 hours of my day yesterday, and I still haven't really gotten close to the end of it. I should make every activity a group activity, just so I only have 26 to grade instead of so many. Is that bad to think that? Yeah. So let me scan and see if there are other more related questions to 442. But I'll get to the language choices in 115, 116. What is your take on balancing work and grad school? Let's say a person has a job and is doing grad school full time. Is that a good idea? And if so, how do we ensure success? I think it's a bad idea, personally. I but I can see the merits of both arguments. For reference, my wife and I were going to college at the same time, getting our undergrad degrees, and I said, I'm not working at all. Well, I did a little part time, but I'm not working because school is important. I have to focus on this because I want to. I'm not going to try to make a little bit of money now just so, at the cost of my future career. You're here to have a really good long-term future career. If you're thinking long-term, I think working full-time during school is a terrible idea because that's taken so much attention away from what you should be doing, which is building the foundation for your career. That's what's important. And working full-time, depending on what the full-time job is, but I see some students like working at Wegmans full-time while they're getting a CS degree. Like, that's just wasted time at Wegmans. You're not learning, you're not growing, you're just selling your time to somebody that you could be using studying or making a side project or something that's actually going to help your career. Putting Wegmans on your resume is not going to help you get a tech job. It doesn't matter at all. The only reason to do that is some people are very adamant. This is my wife's position, that they don't want to take out any loans, so they want to pay for schooling while they're in school. I see the argument. I disagree. My wife and I disagreed. She worked and I didn't. She worked full time and I didn't. But I definitely. So if she were here, she could give her half of it. But I always say no. Don't work full time, unless there are always exceptions to everything. Unless that full time position is a tech position and is related to your career. So if you have I've seen students with full time tech jobs. They were working as developers at startups and stuff like that while they were in school, and then the internship got most of their attention and schoolwork was just a side thought. That was fine because that internship did more to build the foundation of their career than school did at that point. Of course, they were they're seniors at the time, and I think one student is a junior, but that's what they were doing to build their career. So whatever's the most important to building your career and setting that foundation for the rest of your life, is that really worth whatever money you're making while you're in college? I would say no. That said, I have tons of student loans, so that's the downside of my position. Because I took out more student loans than I had to, so I could still live the lifestyle as though I had a full-time job. But it was all borrowed money. And then I'm like, well, I'm thinking long-term, I'm going to have tons of money to pay those off later. And now that I have to pay those off, it kind of sucks. But once those are paid off, I'll be living large. Yeah, poor Skype. I mean, I didn't follow the story too closely, but Skype, last I knew, I don't know if this changed, but they had the idea of supernodes where a user could, their Skype could somehow through their algorithms be nominated for a supernode. And in the background, without you even knowing, it would be doing some of the work that the server should be doing. So they would offload some server work to their users to try to build a kind of non-distributed, kind of a distributed system. Exactly a distributed system, but just by taking advantage of their users' CPU and resources. And I would guess that would be a big reason why they didn't really succeed with this switch that everybody just made to online, why Zoom was there, because Zoom were just using their servers. With supernodes and Skype with supernodes like that, I mean, just think of the privacy concerns. You can't be doing that and be a serious contender. So Skype was, I would guess that's a big reason why Skype is just kind of pigeonholed as not for serious anything. Businesses can't use Skype if that supernode thing is still a thing. Maybe they stopped doing that and I just don't know what I'm talking about. But if they're still doing that, they can't be a serious contender for our business, for anybody's business. For this, are we doing an ad, a story about our app, or an outline for our demo? Because our group went all sorts of different ways. Kind of all three. So it should be an outline for your demo, for your presentation, the 5 to 7 minute presentation at the end of the semester. Should be an outline for that demo. That outline should be a story about your app. So you should structure that 5 to 7 minute presentation. This presentation that you're submitting at the end of the semester with this rubric should follow this structure, at least, loosely. It should be clear that this is in your presentation in some way, shape, or form. You should have this storytelling aspect to it. And it's an ad in the sense that you're selling your product. I wouldn't say an ad because it shouldn't be like a 10 to 30 second kind of thing. It should be obviously 5 to 7 minutes, but I would relate it more to a Kickstarter ad or a Kickstarter video. So it's still an ad. You're still selling your idea. You're trying to get users excited. You're trying to get investors excited. Why should I invest in this and pay you to make this a thing? Or why should a company hire you as a contractor to build this? You're trying to get people excited. So in that sense, it's an ad that you are advertising your product. So I would say all three. So if your teammates focused on just one of those three, then, you need to combine all three. How big of a block minimum for bullet points? Oh, Spavine Rune Slayer. Cut it out. Big. The minimum block for bullet points. I don't know. 56.3. For what regions does someone pursue a PhD in some CS field? Is it one of those things that have to have an aptitude for? But obviously, there's more to it than that. If for PhD is synonymous with research. If you're interested in doing research, PhD is for you. If you're not interested in doing research, a PhD is not for you, and you will hate it. But so that's the dividing line. So are you excited to get in to work on a problem that's never been solved by anybody? You can't really consult anyone. Like, there's no solution manual or anything. Never been solved, and trying to solve it with no exploring brand new bleeding edge, frontier work. If that excites you, go into PhD. If that does not excite you, don't. Because a PhD is typically 5 years. The first 2 years is more typically, I'm speaking in generalities here, but mostly extra coursework, and it's mostly the same as a master's degree. It's just your courses that you would take if you were in a master's program. The next 3 years is just whatever. It's just doing research. You'll meet with your advisor on a regular basis, decide what you should be doing, and then go do it. It's very open-ended. There's no structure to it at all. Because how can there be? You're supposed to be going into uncharted territory and contributing brand new work to the field of computer science or whatever subfield you have. So if that's what you want, do it. If that's not what you want, don't do it. And you got to really want it, too. If you're really excited about research, do it. But if you're not, you might lose motivation at some point. Jesse, send help. Yeah, we don't have a mod. I'd ban him, though. Should I buy followers? Maybe that's... can I undelete that? Maybe it's a good idea. No, Lee Harvasi. No, don't do. I mean, it depends what you mean by typical ad. But if you're talking about, it sounds like you're talking about like an infomercial. I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. Personally, I'm not where it's all black and white, and they're like, don't you hate this when, and then like somebody spills their spaghetti all over the floor. Oh no. Well, now there's our solution. And then there's this big sparkle effect, and everything's bright colors and everything. And they're walking around with their spaghetti. Look at this pan. You should buy this. I mean, if that's what you want to do, especially actually if you really cheese it up and do it in a satirical way, that could be awesome. That could be pretty epic. But you know, I'm not really a fan. If you do it like unironically, I'm not really a fan of that. And even if you do that, you do still have to follow this story structure where you have, you know, you should have a character who's faced with this problem. Your solution comes in. The big problem with that, well, here's why, and then it saves the day, is to have good storytelling. Your solution should show up, and then it should not solve the problem immediately, which it always does in those infomercials. Introduce your solution, let the problem resonate for a little bit, and potentially get worse, as it says here, but let the problem remain for a little bit, and it makes your solution look even more heroic if it doesn't save the day immediately, if it's not just, here's the answer, here you go. And think about any movie you've ever seen ever. The solution doesn't just show up and save the day, because that would be a really boring movie. The solution shows up, and then usually the protagonists have to figure out like how to use the solution or what the solution means, and then eventually they'll use that solution to be able to save the day. But it's not just like, here's the solution, oh cool, my life's better. Here's the app, oh cool, it solved the problem that I had. Maybe they get the app and they use the app for a while, and you know, they're like, oh, this is a neat app, oh cool, and then, hey, my problem is solved, awesome, this is great. So to have good storytelling and follow this part of the rubric, I mean, I might as well pull up the rubric. That is actually something we're looking for. So ignore that at your detriment of your grade. Sales video rubric. Use proper presentation format. Presentation tells a story, and presentation has no misspelling. Well, that second part is kind of unrelated, but presentation tells a story. You gotta tell me a story. Your video has to tell a story, or else, you know, what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A sixth of your presentation grade is storytelling. Is there a major benefit to doing a master's versus jumping straight into the workforce? I'll qualify this. I do this a lot, but I'll make sure, big flashing signs, I'll qualify this with, this is only my opinion. You will get different answers if you ask different people. I think the only reason to do a master's degree, if you're not even thinking about a PhD, you don't want to go into research at all, if you're just thinking master's degree and then workforce versus workforce after bachelor's, the only reason to get a master's degree is if you need 2 more years to figure your shit out. There's no other reason to do a master's. And this does include, like, there's certain topics that we don't have enough courses for in the undergrad. So like if you want to go into cybersecurity, for example, you by definition need 2 more years to figure your stuff out, because we just don't have that offered at the undergrad level like we would need to prepare you. But at the master's level, we have 500 and 600 level courses in cybersecurity, so you can take those. But if there's not something specific and you know what you want to do, go right into the workforce is my advice. Go into the workforce. With a master's degree, you'll have slightly higher starting salary. On average, people with master's degree have higher starting salary. But you also gave up 2 years of salary. Unless you did something like the MSBS, then you're giving up 1 year of salary, and that's more efficient. That's a better plan. If you're doing MSBS, go for it. It's only 1 more year, it's not too bad. But if you're giving up 2 years of salary and also giving up having a bachelor's degree, going into the workforce, after 2 years, you might have earned a raise already. You might have already gotten a raise and gotten higher than the master's starting pay by the time they are entering the workforce. So you can't only look at that. And if you go in with a bachelor's degree and you're competent, you know your stuff, like, you're going to move up really quick. And also, you're going to learn more on the job, on 2 years of on-the-job experience, than 2 more years of taking classes with people like me. You're going to learn more out there. So just get out there in the real world and start writing software. And you're going to learn more than you will in a master's degree. You'll learn different things, mind you. Like you're not going to go on the job and learn cybersecurity, for example, which is why I like that example. That is one of the exceptions. But you'll learn a lot more about software development just by going out there and developing software. For building a mobile app, should we deploy it in app or Play stores? I feel like I've been getting this question for weeks. How am I still getting this question? No, you don't have to deploy it to an app store or a Play store, but you do need to show it running on an actual mobile device. So no emulators. We had a team for the Sprint 2 demo use an emulator for their demo, and that's no good. That's the case that we're discussing behind the scenes. That why did they think that was okay? I don't think, if you're that team, send me an email or something. If I did say that was okay, I don't think I did, but it's possible that I did in misspeaking. But the rubric says it has to run on the appropriate hardware. It doesn't have to be deployed in a store, though, for mobile apps. Release runs on appropriate computers, browsers. And release runs on all appropriate screens, I guess. I'd probably add a word here to say / mobile device. But no, it doesn't have to be in the Play Store or App Store. There's no point to that. I have required that in the past, but you have to pay either, I think it's Google's $25 or iOS's, Apple's $75, just to get your app out there. And there's not much to do. Like once you have an Android APK, it's not much to upload it to the App Store. You just got to pay Google their fee. And there's not much educational value in forcing you to pay a fee. Whereas with web apps, you do learn how to actually deploy on hardware. Just ask the groups who are doing that and struggling with that. There's a lot to learn and a lot to do there. And there are free options. Heroku, the CSE server, Cheshire, AWS. There are free options, so that's worth the educational value. But you do have to, during your demos, if you have a mobile app, it better run on a phone. It better run on whatever mobile device you're targeting, because that is the appropriate hardware. Appropriate computers. I'll say your phone is a computer. I'll say this still gets it right, but it needs to be running on the appropriate hardware. Oh, this is where the security comes into that bullet point. Why does higher education cost so much? Oh boy. I mean, where to begin? Because you'll pay it. I mean, it doesn't cost so much at UB because you're going to a state school, unless you're paying out-of-state tuition, which you might be. But yeah, because, I mean, you'll pay it. And then we get all the, and Beefy Indian Kid, you get all the government subsidies. You get your government guaranteed loans with low interest rates. You fill out your FAFSA and the government gives you money to do it. If the government's going to help pay for it, colleges are going to charge more. That's simple economics. Supply and demand. Demand went up because the customer doesn't have to pay for it. If a store says, hey, everything's half off, demand goes up. Especially with grants. Like we have the Empire Grant now. You can go to college for free if your family doesn't make enough money. Of course, college is going to be more expensive after that. And that said, we still have, I feel like we're always in faculty meetings talking about budget crises. Like we don't have enough money. We're always looking for more money too. So if there's ever an opportunity for like a dean or a provost to make more money somewhere, they're going to do it. And as a state school, we're pretty restricted on being able to raise tuition. I believe SUNY has to make those decisions. But they find ways to get your money. But if you look at private schools, like a private school, that's how much you realistically should be paying. But the state subsidizes, since we're a SUNY school, the state subsidizes a lot of your tuition, so you get a nice low rate if you're paying the in-state tuition. But look at private school prices where you're paying $30,000 a year, including room and board, where you're paying 30, sometimes 40 or 50,000 a year at some certain schools. That's what you should be paying. But New York State covers, through people's taxes, covers the rest of the cost. That's why, actually, this probably isn't very apparent to any of you, unless you're TAs. But we're getting our funding cut. Our budgets are way low this year because the state decreased how much money they give us by 20%. They're like, well, because of COVID, the state is running low on money, so we're just going to give you less. And they can just decide that, and then we have to deal with it. We just have to work with 20% less budget. So we still have the same students. You're still paying the same tuition. But since the state subsidy went down, we have to work on a much lower budget. So you get less value from your tuition dollars than you were before, because the state just said, we're not paying you what we used to. And apparently, I'm surprised they can just make that decision and just be like, you get no say. You get less money now. I'll try to stop the commentary because it goes down a bad path. Yeah, I think so too. I think the education bubble is real. I don't see how this, especially with COVID hitting and everybody getting used to doing things online, I think you're going to see a big tech ed company start taking a lot of the market. Online universities have a really bad rap right now, but now that every university is an online university, it's just going to take a group of people who put together solid courses that scale to millions of people, and I think it's going to start bursting. That's my opinion. Maybe it won't, because, whenever this much money is involved, there are a lot of powerful, very, very powerful players that are going to try to prevent that from happening. So maybe they'll be able to slow it down at the very least. But, like, if Google decided to create a university and you could go to Google University, how many millions of people are going to do that instead of going to a traditional brick and mortar college? They'll get probably everybody who's serious about their education, and brick and mortar colleges will just deteriorate into party zones only. They have nothing to do with education. I think that could be the future of education. So I'm ready for that. If, hey, big tech ed company startup, if stuff starts going south and you need to hire someone and you're listening to this, I'll send you my CV. Since I'm just an online instructor anyway, why wouldn't I be an online instructor somewhere else? What am I doing for Halloween? We're having some family. My wife's family is coming over with all their kids, and all the cousins are going to play. And we're still up in the air whether we're going to attempt to go trick-or-treating or not. I don't think we are. I'm leaning towards no myself, but I'm kind of on the fence. But I think we're just going to do our own thing here and just have them get in their costumes and hang out together. But I don't know. We might play it by ear. If there are a lot of people out there trick-or-treating, maybe we'll go test the waters with them. I don't know. I just don't want to... With trick-or-treating, I want to because, man, for kids to miss it trick-or-treating, that sucks. But, if my neighbors are not comfortable with masks, like if we're walking around with masks and they're still freaking out and we knock on their door and they're disinfecting everything. I don't know. I just don't want my neighborhood to freak out. If they're not confident that the masks are going to work. Because obviously we'll wear masks. But if I have neighbors who are like, masks don't work, I just don't want Halloween to turn into a situation. Beefy Indian kid. I might have you fooled. I think it's reversed. Like, I don't know more. A lot of what I say is speculation, especially when I'm talking about the education bubble. That's all speculation. You shouldn't take me seriously on that. But I do want to start fires because it's fun. So I don't know anything, but I do want to start fires. There are obviously times where my speculation, I have to stop it short because it's just getting into, getting into dangerous territories. I don't want to be like, the education bubble is going to burst. Everybody panic, run for your lives. Like, I'm not going to say that kind of stuff. But I think I think universities are not delivering the value that they could. So I think I look at it this way, and especially since we just went through the redesign, and I said, oh my goodness, it's almost 4:00. I got to get ready for that other meeting soon. But especially with the redesign we just went through, we were all thinking about how we'd restructure things. And there are a lot of things that we would want to do, but we can't because of the current structure that we're in. So I was thinking a lot about if I had to start over from scratch and I had several hundred students with a few $1,000s each just show up and say, teach me computer science. We'll give you a few $1,000s every year. Go. And you got 4 years with this group of a couple hundred students. I would come up with a lot of ideas and a lot of things to do, and none of it would come close to resembling what we're actually doing right now. And I understand we have a lot of different constraints, and it's really hard to change things. But like the idea that you take this course and learn this thing, and then you jump over to this course and learn this thing, and everything's just so disconnected. And each course is its own tower, and there's not much communication with instructors. Even like I do some, I try to know what's going on in other courses to an extent. Like even that 191, I don't know exactly what they're covering these days. Like it's hard to keep up on every course and maintain your own. But we're all in isolation like that. And there's a lot of duplicate work. Like a lot of my time is spent doing things that every other faculty member has to do, and we don't all have to do it, but we do because we're all teaching separate courses, like maintaining individual grade books for each course, things like that. We could cut down a lot of waste in that, and then deliver a higher quality product. And I just like to start over, get rid of the isolated courses, focus on the concepts more. We have to have things like this course is a prereq for this course. Well, that's almost never the actual case. It's this one topic in this one course is a prereq because we're going to talk about it and assume you understand it in this other course. If you just have that one concept down and understood, you should be able to take that other course. And it shouldn't even be courses. You should be able to work at your own pace, I believe. If you didn't have to be here for 4 years and you could just graduate and start your job when you were done, how many of you would study a lot harder, work every summer, get done in 2 years, learn all the material and the concepts and focus on the concepts is a big thing in 2 years, and then go out there and start your job because you know everything that you're supposed to be knowing. Now we have you on this steady track. It's like a conveyor belt where it will take 4 years, unless you can rearrange your schedule and get it done in 3 or 3.5. There are things you can do to graduate early if you take extra classes. But we have you on this 4-year conveyor belt, and you go from station to station. Okay, now we're going to install algorithms. Now we're going to install distributed systems. I couldn't even think of a second course there. We're going to install this, and you're never held accountable for any of that material after that course. You get through 331, and nobody's going to talk to you about an algorithm or ask you to write a proof ever again, unless you take another theory course. Like, there's just so much waste, and it's just so bad. It is not what I would do if I were designing education, college experience from the ground up. So once somebody comes around, an organization comes around that's not a traditional university and says, let's rethink education, I think that has the chance to disrupt the entire market. where no traditional university seems to be willing to do that. Because you bring up, if I go to a faculty meeting and say, I don't think we should have courses anymore, I'll get laughed out of the room. But we shouldn't. Like, we should be rethinking this. In frickin' current year, it's outdated. It's not the way we should be learning anymore. But we can't make a change, so it needs to be like a startup company. It's probably going to come from the private sector and just completely revolutionize, say, hey, all those things that you should have been doing for years, we're just going to do them all and get all the students. And by the way, tuition will be affordable because we're not going to charge you, ridiculous numbers, because we're going to figure out how to scale these courses, which is one of the big issues. That's one of the big things that's holding us back. Everything has to scale to huge numbers. And then I think that there's the opportunity for that to happen where something in the private sector can just destroy everything. 2024, hell, write me in on 2020. I can be Jesse 2020. It's not too late. Go out and vote for me. Yeah, if you could just rip through everything. So one nice thing about a PhD is you can go at your own pace. Once you're done with those courses, you do your research at your own pace. Of course, research is so hard that it's going to take you years anyway. But that's my rant about that. That's probably one of my more positive rants because I'm complaining about something that we probably all have complaints about instead of complaining about things we don't all agree with. But yeah, so that's what I mean by the bubble might burst. There's an opportunity there for an organization to come along and make all those innovations that we just can't make in this structure. And for a little more context than that, I'm not picking on the university or saying I would get laughed out of that faculty meeting. They should laugh me out of that meeting, by the way. So say we all got together and we decided we are going to make this change. What do we do with like the sophomores and juniors? We make this change, and do the sophomores and juniors finish out their last few years with traditional college? Or do they have to switch into our new thing? What if they don't want the new thing? What if they wanted the traditional experience? What do they do? What do we do with that? And there's going to be, whatever we decide there's going to be this transition period where we're effectively doing both things. We're doing traditional college and the new revolutionary thing. And that would take roughly double the amount of resources, and no budget is going to be able to support that unless we had some huge influx of cash where we can do both of those at the same time. And we'd have to hire a lot more faculty just for that transition period. That it would just be too hard to do. And something revolutionary like that, I don't see a good way that it could be done piecemeal. We can't just make one small change each year. At what point do you get rid of the idea of courses? Like that's not something you can just do. So there's reasons why it's not going to happen, why it does have to come from an outside organization, some not affiliated with traditional academia. But anyway, with that, I'll leave you all with that. A lot to think about. But make sure you get your submissions in and Autolab. I'm going to get ready for this meeting. I got 5 minutes and I got to drink some water and stuff. So I'll see everybody Monday. Have a great weekend.